Hello everybody, my name is Chris. I'd like to welcome everyone back to my series which I call Blueprint for Composition. Over the course of the past few installments we have been looking at various types of complex sentences and various types of subordinate clauses within complex sentences. So we did some practice exercises dealing with the distinctions between adverb clauses and adjective clauses, and we did some exercises on how to identify the difference between adjective clauses and adverb clauses, not only by their connectors, but by their locations in sentences. And we also looked at how to reduce adjective clauses and adverb clauses. So what we're going to do in this installment today is look at the other type of subordinate clause, which is known as the noun clause. So we have three major types of subordinate clauses: adjective clauses, adverb clauses, and noun clauses. So today we're going to get into some specific detail about the form, the function, and the location of noun clauses in sentences. So just to review a little bit before we get started as to the purpose of this series. So as I said at the very beginning of this series, the purpose of the series is not direct grammar instruction, although we will get into some grammatical issues and points as we go. The main goal of this series is to help people improve their writing by giving people a better understanding of how sentences are composed in formal academic writing. So we're not talking about informal conversational language here for the most part. We're talking about formal academic writing, okay, what we call standard English. So this is important to know in terms of writing for scholastic purposes, whether it's the form of a paragraph, whether it's the form of an essay, or whether it is for test-taking purposes, because a lot of these standardized tests require you to write paragraphs, to write essays, and to have some ability to be your own editor. So I am a firm believer in what is called the writing process, which means that you start with an idea, you make a graphic organizer, you put down your thoughts, you structure how you want to organize your essay, and then you write the first draft. And then you go back and look at it carefully, line by line, point by point, paragraph by paragraph. And then you make revisions and you make changes and you come up with a second draft. And then you go back another time and you look at it again. Is there anything that you can improve? Is there anything that you can change? Is there anything that is not clear? Is there anything you can make better? And then you do the final draft, so that your final product, your finished draft, is the best shape it can be in. So what we're going to do today is go over the last form of the subordinate clause, known as the noun clause. And this, again, will help people to be able to revise their sentences more accurately. So, noun clauses is our subject for today. So let's start just by giving a quick overview. What are the functions of noun clauses? So it says here, noun clauses functions as nouns. So this is another reason why it's important to know what the different parts of speech are in very specific detail. So nouns, as we know, refer to people or places or things or ideas. So those four general categories satisfy the definition of what a noun is. A noun is a person, a place, a thing, or an idea. The noun clause functions in the same way that nouns do, in the sense that they are located in a sentence in positions where it is consistent with the position of nouns. For example, so the noun clause in a sentence can function as, number one, the subject of a sentence. The same way that you can have a one-word noun or a compound noun as the subject of a sentence, you may also have a noun clause functioning as the subject of a sentence in front of a main verb. Okay, the same way that a one-word noun or a compound noun would function as the subject of a sentence in front of a main verb. Number two, the noun clause can function as the object of a verb. So we talked about it in the early installments of this series. The sentence organization pattern in English, subject, verb, object, is the standard organizational formula for statements in academic English. So when you have a statement, 9 times out of 10, you have the subject first, then the main verb, and then the object of that verb. if that verb happens to be an action verb. So there are many, many, many action verbs that will be followed by object nouns in sentences. So a noun clause, as it functions in the same way a noun functions, can also be in the subject position. It can also be in the object position after a main verb. And number 3, it can also function as the object of a preposition. All right, so after a preposition, you may have a noun object. The same way that you can have a noun object after a preposition, you can also have a noun clause as an object of a preposition. The difference is that instead of a one-word noun or a compound noun, we have a subordinate clause functioning in that same role. So just to review for a moment, what is the form that the subordinate clause in general takes, and what is the form that a noun clause would take in a sentence? Well, as we have already established in previous episodes of this series, a subordinate clause starts with a connector. So if you want to use the word connector, I find it easier to use the word connector, but in general we call it a subordinating conjunction. All right, that is the technical term for what I like to call the subordinate clause connector. I've seen it written in various ways in various textbooks. Sometimes it's written as a connector, sometimes it's written as a subordinating conjunction. I prefer the word connector. It's more a little bit easier to remember that way. And then after that connector, you have a subject. And then after the subject, you have a verb. All right? So this satisfies the formula or the requirements for a subordinate clause, connector plus subject plus verb. We've seen it with adjective clauses. We've seen it with adverb clauses, the same structure. Now the same structure is used to establish the noun clause. So what kinds of connectors are possible to use to start a noun clause? Well, we looked at the connectors for adjective clauses, mainly who, which, and that. We looked at the connectors for adverb clauses of different types, time clauses, contrast clauses, cause and effect clauses, conditional clauses, and things like that. So all of those have different connectors. But there is some overlap in terms of what connectors can be used to start noun clauses. So you will notice that the noun clause connectors that I listed here should look familiar because they are the 5 W's that are so commonly taught when talking about how to approach reading comprehension questions: the who, the what, the where, the when, the why, and the how. So I did not put all of them up here, but I just wanted to illustrate the most commonly used noun clause connectors. But you will notice there is a who connector, there's a which connector, and there's a that connector. So these 3 connectors, who, which, and that, are also consistent with adjective clauses or adjective clause connectors. And then you have a when connector, which is consistent with an adverb clause connector of time. So a lot of times students will get confused about the identification of a clause as a noun clause, an adjective clause, or an adverb clause, particularly because they have this overlap in connectors. So that is why you really have to be clear as to not only the form of the subordinate clause, but also the function of the clause itself and the location of the clause in the sentence. So the location of the clause in the sentence and the function of that clause will determine what type of clause it is, adjective, adverb, or noun. So that is why we really have to be careful. Right? So these are the 3 potential functions that are most commonly used in the noun clause situation. So let me just give an example about one noun clause, how it can appear in various different ways. All right? So I'm going to use the same noun clause in these examples right here, 1, 2, and 3, but I'm using them in different ways, in different functions. So what I'm going to show you right here is this. All right? This is your noun clause right there. And the sentence is, what you said was surprising. Okay? So here's our connector, here's our subject, here's our verb. But you will notice there's also another verb right here, was, followed by an ing adjective. So the point is that all of this clause, what you said, all of that is a noun clause, and that is in the subject location. All right? So what I'm saying is that the whole noun clause is functioning as the subject of the main clause. And you may say, how is that possible? Well, it is weird, it is strange to think that a whole subordinate clause is actually the subject for a main clause, but that is how it is in formal academic writing. So, how do I know that this is a subject location is because it's right in front of this main verb was. If I was to take out this clause and replace it with a pronoun, for example, the word it was surprising, it would still make sense. Because what I'm saying is that this noun clause is fulfilling the role of a subject the same way a subject pronoun could fulfill the same role. It was surprising. So, that's the subject location. All right, subject of what? Of main clause. All right, so this is the only case that I am aware of where you can use a subordinate clause as the subject of a main clause. So the whole thing is one clause, basically one idea, but you have a subordinate clause functioning as the subject of the main clause at the same time. Second example. I thought what you said was surprising. All right, so here we have the same noun clause, what you said. However, it's in a different location now. So if it's in a different location, it must have a different function. So what is the function of it in this case? Well, here's our verb right there. I thought is the verb. Subject I thought is your verb. So there you have a main verb, an action verb. And the word think is an action verb, so it can be followed by a noun object. So, again, what you said, this whole clause is your noun clause, and that is functioning as what? Object of verb. Okay? The same way that if you replaced it again with a pronoun, such as the word it, then it would still work in that location. I thought it was surprising, because it can be a subject pronoun or an object pronoun. So therefore, I thought it was surprising. So again, action verb followed by an object. That is consistent with this second function right here, object of verb. So, subject of a sentence before a verb, object of a verb after a main verb, and I should, again, point out that you need an action verb here. And then the third type is the object of a preposition. So let's look at the third sentence down here. I was surprised by what you said. So again, we have this exact same noun clause, what you said, is your noun clause. All right, so there's your noun clause here. But you will notice it's in a different location. So if it's in a different location, it must be serving a different function. So therefore, we have to look at this word right here, which is a preposition. The word by here is a preposition. So therefore, what is the function of this noun clause in this location is the object of a preposition. Right? So I'll label that object of preposition. Right? So here, we have the same noun clause, exactly the same noun clause in each sentence, but in three different locations and serving three different functions. So that is how the noun clause can be identified easily in a sentence, even though it may be in different locations. So you really have to know what the possible locations are. So object of a preposition would be after a preposition. All right, so again, this is why it's very important to know the different parts of speech and how to identify the different parts of speech. Noun, verb, adjective, adverb, preposition, conjunction, etc. So that when it comes time to recognize, is the sentence written properly or not properly, you can sort of analyze out the different functions of the clauses and phrases based on the locations in the sentence. Now, that's the standard three. Subject, object of verb, object of preposition. It is also possible to find noun clauses used after certain other types of words in certain circumstances. So, I put up a couple of extra locations where it is possible to locate or find noun clauses in sentences. So over here, if you look at the right-hand side of the board, it says other locations for noun clauses. So one of them, as you see here, is after adjectives. All right, so it is possible to use noun clauses after certain adjectives. So I gave two examples of how to do this. So let's look at the first one. The first one says, I was sorry that I hurt your feelings. All right, I was sorry that I hurt your feelings. Where is the adjective in this sentence? The adjective is right here, sorry. Okay, so this is your main clause right here, I was sorry. So here you have an adjective followed by the word that. All right, that I hurt your feelings is a noun clause. So you may say to yourself at this moment, wait a minute, hold the phone there. The word that is an adjective clause connector, isn't it? Well, under certain circumstances, yes it is. But again, look at the list of possible connectors for noun clauses. You'll see the word that is on the list. So how do I know that this is a noun clause and not an adjective clause? Very simply, because it doesn't follow a noun, it follows an adjective. So a noun clause following an adjective is the right choice here, not an adjective clause modifying an adjective, because we know adjective clauses modify nouns. Let's look at the second example. It says, Ming Chung was glad that she was accepted into the University of California. Okay? So where's the adjective in this case? The adjective is right here, glad. All right, so glad is an adjective. An adjective that describes someone's feeling the same way that the word sorry describes someone's feeling. All right? So it's a descriptive adjective here. Glad and sorry are both descriptive adjectives. So the main clause is Ming Chung was glad. All right? She was glad that, so here we have another connector, that, and all of this remainder of the sentence after the word that is your noun clause. All right? So that's one thing that you can keep an eye out for, is noun clauses after adjectives. Also, as it says here, the second kind of example is after certain infinitives. So an infinitive, as we know, is the word to plus a base verb. So to plus base verb. All right, that is the form of the infinitive. So we may find in certain sentences noun clauses following infinitives. And I provided two examples of that here. So the first example says, they were happy to hear that you got a new job. So where's our infinitive? Our infinitive is right here. Okay? And after the infinitive, we have a noun clause, that you've got a new job. So this is noun clause, I'll abbreviate that NC. Here's your connector, again, the word that. Second example, it was nice to see that they are doing well. All right, where's our infinitive? Our infinitive is right here, the infinitive to see. All right, to plus a base verb, to see, to plus a base verb, to hear. So this is an infinitive followed by a connector, that, they are doing well. All of that is a noun clause. All right, so these are kind of special cases of noun clause positioning in sentences, after adjectives and after infinitives. All right, so in addition to the three on the left-hand side of the board, subject, object of verb, and object of preposition, you need to keep in mind these are also possible locations for noun clauses, after adjectives and after infinitives. Okay, now, just to sort of test your knowledge at this point and see how well you're doing, I wrote a few examples on the board of sentences that contain noun clauses. And what I would like to do for these three examples is identify the noun clauses in the sentence and describe its function. So I'm going to give you viewers at home a chance to try to figure out where the noun clause begins and ends first, and then I'm going to underline it, label it, and see how well you do. So let's look at the first example, down here at the bottom of the board. It says, I'm sure that you'll be able to pass the test. All right, so if you're following along at home, keeping score, see if you can identify the noun clause in that sentence and label its function. All right, identify its function. I'm sure that you'll be able to pass the test. Step number one, look for the connector. So here's our connector, the word that. So that you'll be able to pass the test is your entire noun clause. So I'm going to label it NC for noun clause. Now, the second step is to identify its function. Is it the subject of a sentence? Is it the object of a verb? Is it the object of a preposition? Is it a case of a noun clause after an adjective or after an infinitive? You tell me. So if you said, this word right here is an adjective plus noun clause, you would be correct. So this one is an example of noun clause after adjective. All right, so that's the first one. Noun clause after adjective, if you said that, you would be correct. Second example. Rodrigo didn't know who wrote the scarlet letter. All right, one more time. Rodrigo didn't know who wrote the scarlet letter. Step one, identify the noun clause in the sentence. Where does the noun clause begin? Where does the noun clause end? All right, in this case, you should be able to identify this connector who right here, and then who wrote the scarlet letter would be your entire noun clause. So I'm going to label that NC down here. All right, who wrote the scarlet letter? Now, under normal circumstances, you would think that this construction, who wrote the scarlet letter, would be followed by a question mark. And in general, you would be correct. But this is not a case of what is called a direct question. This is a case of what is known as an indirect question. So, noun clauses are sometimes referred to as indirect questions. This is one example of how it would be classified as an indirect question. So you will notice it's in a statement form, not a question form. Now, what is the function of the noun clause? Well, we have to identify this right here as our verb. Okay? So the independent clause in this case is Rodrigo didn't know. That's the independent clause. What didn't he know? He didn't know who wrote the scarlet letter. So therefore, all of this noun clause is functioning as what? Object of a verb. All right, so if you said that, the noun clause in this sentence is the object of a verb. Perfect. Third sentence. Jackson thought about what kind of job he should get. All right, Jackson thought about what kind of job he should get. Step one, identify the noun clause. Step two, label it in terms of its function. So, first thing I would do is look for the connector. Same as I would if I was trying to identify an adjective clause, same as I would if I was trying to define or locate an adverb clause. Look for the connector. Here's the connector, the word what. Okay? So the word what is our connector here. So all of that right there, what kind of job he should get, that's your noun clause. And step two, what is its function? Subject of sentence, object of verb, object preposition, after adjective or after infinitive. In this case, we have to look at this word right here, the word about. Okay? What kind of part of speech is the word about? The word about is a preposition. So that's preposition plus noun clause, which means it is the object of a preposition. So if you said object of a preposition, you would be correct. Okay? So all of these functions, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, are very commonly used with noun clauses. So hopefully this was illustrative and informational and beneficial in terms of helping to understand a little bit more clearly what these noun clauses are and what they function as in sentences, how to identify them and how to use them properly. In our next episode, we're going to do a sort of overall review exercise where you will have to look at sentences and identify, does the sentence contain an adjective clause, does the sentence contain an adverb clause, or does it contain a noun clause, or a combination of these three different clauses. So we're going to stop here for now. We'll clear the board, and then we'll get into that practice exercise. So I would like to thank you for watching, and hope to see you again very soon.